He married her on a dare, just a waitress with nothing to lose. But when her sister collapses and a secret ties their families in blood, his cruel game shatters into something real and dangerous. Now he's fighting not just for love, but for redemption. What he doesn't know is, she was never the one being played. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The city skyline shimmered through the penthouse windows of Ashford Tower, casting a golden glow across the room where Blake Ashford sat sprawled on a leather couch, swirling a glass of aged scotch. The 29-year-old heir to the Ashford Hotel empire had everything: looks, wealth, charm, and not a shred of commitment. "You couldn't last 6 months with one woman," Jared sneered, leaning forward. "You'd implode." Blake scoffed. "I could marry someone tomorrow and survive 6 months. Easy." "Prove it," another friend chimed in, eyes gleaming. "Find a complete stranger, no models, no society girls, someone with zero connections to our world." Blake narrowed his eyes. "What's in it for me?" "You last the full 6 months. No cheating, no scandal, no backing out. We'll give you control of the Pacific Division, no questions asked." That made Blake pause. His father had kept that division locked under his thumb for years, claiming Blake wasn't ready. Winning this bet would prove otherwise. "You're on," he said smoothly, already imagining the victory party. Lily Torres pushed her hair back under the greasy visor as she handed a Happy Meal across the counter at McDonald's. Her shift had just ended, but the bags under her eyes spoke of years of exhaustion, not hours. She glanced at the time. She had to race across town to the hospital. Her sister Sophia's medication bill was due, and the last warning notice still burned in her coat pocket. A sleek black car parked outside, completely out of place among the beat-up sedans and delivery bikes. Lily barely noticed until the man from the back stepped out. Tall, sharp suit, infuriatingly handsome. "Hi," he said, sliding his sunglasses up and offering a smirk. "Are you available for a life-changing opportunity?" "I'm sorry, what?" Lily blinked, thinking he must be joking. "I need a wife. For 6 months. I'll pay you $50,000 up front and the rest after. You'll live in my penthouse, have full healthcare coverage, and anything your sister needs." She laughed nervously. "Is this a prank? Because if it is, it's cruel." He pulled out a contract. "It's real. You get your freedom after 6 months. On one of his accounts, Norman told his wife, "Olivia is selling myself." He nodded, unfazed. "You will if the hospital says no again." He walked away before she could respond. That night, Lily stared at Sophia's sleeping face. The nurse had told her, gently, that without next week's payment, the treatments would stop. Her hands trembled as she reread the fine print of the contract. She didn't sleep. By morning, she walked into Ashford Tower, contract in hand. The private wedding took place in the garden of one of Blake's hotels, hidden from the press, decorated by a bored event planner who didn't ask questions. Lily wore a borrowed dress, white but simple. Her hands were cold. Blake looked immaculate, detached. His expression didn't change as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. She glanced at him, hoping for something kindness, maybe, but his face remained unreadable. As they walked away from the altar, he leaned toward her. "We'll keep public appearances minimal. No need for anyone to get attached." Lily nodded, heart sinking. She felt like a transaction. The bridal suite was silent, elegant, and suffocating. Lily sat on the edge of the massive bed, alone now, her dress wrinkled and her makeup smudged from a few silent tears. She pulled a small photo from her purse. It was worn at the edges. Sophia, laughing in a pink tutu, her eyes full of dreams. "I did this for you," Lily whispered, voice cracking. "Please don't ever find out what it cost." She placed the photo on the nightstand, next to a glass of untouched champagne. In another part of the hotel, Blake laughed with his friends, toasting to the most ridiculous bet of the year. None of them knew Lily, none of them cared. But something in Blake's gaze shifted as he watched a video sent from the wedding photographer. Lily, standing in the garden, alone for a moment before the ceremony, pressing a trembling hand to her heart. She didn't know he was watching. She didn't know he felt the first flicker of something real. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the sleek expanse of Blake Ashford's penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, cold and glittering like the life she was stepping into. Lily paused in the threshold, her fingers still trembling from the courthouse wedding that had ended less than an hour ago. The diamond ring on her finger felt too heavy, too alien. Blake didn't even look back as he stepped inside. "This is the living room, kitchen's through there. You'll have the guest suite." His voice was clipped, all business. Lily forced herself to nod, though her throat felt tight. "Okay." She followed him into the space, each step muffled on the marble floors. Everything was pristine, sterile, like a showroom, not a home. A gilded cage, she thought bitterly. "Let's get some things straight," Blake said, loosening his tie as he dropped onto a leather couch. "This is a contract marriage. You'll play your part, their presence at events, act civil. But that's it. No touching, no kissing, and definitely no real feelings." Lily blinked, stunned by the coldness in his tone. "Don't worry, I'm not here for romance." "Good," he said, without looking at her. She excused herself and went to the guest room. It was larger than the entire apartment she used to share with her sister. Velvet curtains, cream-colored bedding, a chandelier that looked more expensive than her hospital bills combined. Still, it felt like someone else's life. Later that night, she unpacked the single bag she brought from her old apartment. Worn clothes, a framed photo of her sister, and a notebook filled with her scribbled poems. She placed the picture on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it. "Did I really just marry a stranger?" she whispered. In her mind, her sister's voice echoed like a memory. "You always protect me, Lily. You're my hero." She buried her face in her hands. This wasn't heroism, it was survival. Flashbacks came like waves as she lay in bed that night. She remembered being 17, standing outside a factory at 5 a.m. for her first shift, knowing her little sister needed medicine they couldn't afford. She remembered nights of scrubbing tables at diners, racing between double shifts, collapsing on couches. Her back had ached, but her heart had burned with resolve. She would keep them afloat, even when their mother disappeared, even when the world didn't care. Now, she was in a skyscraper, married to a man who wore suits that cost more than her childhood home, and yet she'd never felt poorer. The next morning, Blake had already left. A handwritten note lay on the kitchen counter. "Event tonight. Black tie, be ready by 7. "No please, no thank you, just expectation." Lily sighed. So much for dignity. The stylist Blake had hired arrived at 4. The woman was efficient, polite, and emotionless. Lily emerged 2 hours later in a designer gown and heels she could barely walk in. At the gala, the cameras flashed like lightning. People whispered behind their champagne flutes. Blake put a hand on her lower back when they entered, but the gesture was stiff, rehearsed. She smiled anyway. For her sister, for the contract. But inside she was shrinking. As the evening dragged on, Lily stood near the bar while Blake mingled with CEOs, socialites, and media magnates. She caught snippets of conversation, money, stocks, mergers, nothing that belonged to her world. She sipped sparkling water, pretending not to notice how people glanced at her and quickly looked away, like she was a stain on silk. Behind her, a group of Blake's friends gathered near the edge of the ballroom. "Where'd he even find her?" one of them snickered. "She looks like she got lost on her way to a fast food shift." "Probably did," another laughed. "Must have been a dare." Lily's chest tightened. She didn't turn. She didn't flinch. But she heard every word, each one digging into her skin like splinters. Blake stood only a few feet away. He heard them too, she was sure of it. But he said nothing, didn't defend her, didn't even glance her way. That silence was louder than the laughter. When the gala ended, they returned to the penthouse in separate cars. Lily walked straight to her room without a word. But her heart was heavy, and her pride, already fragile, felt shattered. She opened her nightstand drawer to reach for her sister's photo, and that's when she saw it. An envelope, old and creased, tucked between her notebook and a book of poetry. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it out. Postmarked 5 years ago, addressed to Lily Torres. The return address was from a rehab center. Her mother. She stared at it for a long time. She didn't remember ever receiving this. She would have remembered. Had it slipped behind the drawer years ago? Or had she hidden it, refusing to confront the pain of what might be inside? Her mind flashed back to the day their mother left. No goodbye, just an empty kitchen and a note that said, "I can't do this anymore." That night, Lily didn't sleep. She sat at her window, staring out at the city's lights, the unopened letter clutched in her hands. The next morning, Blake walked into the kitchen to find her already dressed, hair pulled back, no trace of the elegant woman from the night before. "Did you enjoy the gala?" he asked casually. She met his gaze. "Your friends are charming." He didn't reply. "You mocked me behind my back, Blake," she said. "And you let them." His jaw tightened. "They're idiots." "But you didn't stop them." A beat of silence passed. "I didn't ask you to save me," she said. "But I didn't expect to feel more alone after marrying someone than I did before." He stared at her for a moment, as if trying to figure out who she really was. "This wasn't supposed to be personal, Lily. You agreed to that." "I agreed to pretend, not to be humiliated." She turned and left the room before he could respond. Back in her room, she sat down and finally opened the letter. The ink was smudged, the writing shaky, but the words hit like thunder. "I'm sorry for everything. I'm getting help. I want to be better. For you. For her. Please write back." Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Her mother had reached out, and Lily had never known. Now she was trapped in a world of luxury and lies, and somehow she still felt like that 18-year-old girl standing in line at the pharmacy counting coins. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The gown, the jewels, they weren't her. But the fire in her eyes? That was real. She wasn't just playing wife anymore. She was surviving. And someday, she'd make this golden cage her own. Blake Ashford had never paid attention to people like Lily Torres before. Not really. Not in the way that made you notice the tiny things, the way someone set a glass down gently, the way they folded their hands when nervous, or how they'd smile with their eyes instead of their mouth. But Lily was impossible to ignore. She moved through his massive penthouse like she didn't belong, and maybe she didn't. Her clothes were plain, her shoes scuffed, her hair tied back in a way that said she didn't have time to think about elegance. But she held herself with a kind of quiet dignity that unsettled Blake more than the most jovial socialite ever had. His friends noticed it too. At a private dinner one night, they whispered behind crystal glasses. "She looks like a housekeeper, not a wife." Did he find her in a soup kitchen? She probably married him for the health insurance. Lily stood just feet away, pretending not to hear. But Blake saw it, the way her shoulders stiffened, how her eyes stared a little too long at an untouched glass of water. And he said nothing. Later, as the laughter echoed down the marble hallway, he found her sitting alone on the edge of the guest room bed. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, her back straight, her eyes blank. "I'm sorry about them," he offered awkwardly. She didn't look at him. "It's fine." But it wasn't. From that moment on, something in her changed. She stopped trying to be invisible. She started being herself. She helped the housekeeping staff reorganize the pantry, not because she had to, but because she saw how inefficient it was. When the chef cut himself, she was the first to bring a bandage. When the doorman sneezed, she came down the next day with a thermos of homemade broth. Blake watched her from the shadows of his own life, baffled. She never acted like she belonged, but she never begged for approval either. That kind of grace, it wasn't something you learned in etiquette school. It came from surviving. And he was starting to realize just how much she'd survived. One afternoon, he came downstairs to find her comforting a sobbing housekeeper, an older woman named Rosa, whose teenage son had been suspended from school for fighting. Lily knelt beside her, speaking softly in Spanish, brushing the woman's hair from her face. It stopped him cold, because for the briefest moment, he saw his mother again. Not the glamorous socialite on the magazine covers, but the mother who used to hum lullabies while cooking, who once pulled him into her lap when he was 7 and scared of thunder. The woman who died too young before she could see what her son had become. Blake turned away, chest tightening with something unnameable. That night, his assistant pulled him aside. "Sir, there's a call from Mercy General. It's about Miss Torrey's sister." His heart dropped. "What happened?" "She collapsed at school. Dehydration. They're admitting her." Without waiting, Blake ordered the hospital bills covered. But the next morning, Lily stormed into his office. "You paid her medical bill." Her voice trembled, not with gratitude but fury. "I handled it," he said calmly. "It's taken care of." "You had no right?" she snapped. "You can't just throw money at my life like it's a vending machine." He raised an eyebrow. "I was trying to help." "You don't understand. This makes me feel like I owe you something, like I'm some obligation you're checking off your list." "I didn't ask for thanks," he said flatly. "And that makes it worse?" she hissed. "Because you don't even see how it makes me feel." They stood in silence, staring each other down across the sleek glass desk. The tension buzzed like electricity. Finally, she turned to go. "You think I'm heartless," he said quietly. She paused at the door. "No, I think you're terrified of feeling anything real." That night, she locked her door for the first time since their wedding. But hours later, she heard something, footsteps soft against the hardwood. A shadow paused outside her door. She didn't move, didn't breathe. He stood there a long time. Then he left. In his own suite, Blake opened the glove compartment of his rarely used vintage car. There, beneath an old valet stub and a pair of sunglasses, lay a small velvet box. Inside, a gold locket, his mother's. He hadn't touched it in years. But something made him pick it up. The next day, Lily received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside, a jewelry box and a note with just 2 words, "For courage." The locket was simple, worn. Inside was a photo of a woman, elegant, smiling softly. On the other side, an empty space. Lily stared at it for a long time. At night, she sat on the penthouse balcony, the wind tousling her hair. She clutched the locket in her hand and tried to remember the last time someone gave her something that wasn't out of pity or necessity. She couldn't, and yet, this didn't feel like either. Meanwhile, Blake stood in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of whiskey he wouldn't drink. He stared at the door to the balcony, devil-creaked, then turned away. A week passed. They didn't speak much, but something unspoken simmered between them. Then Lily's sister took a turn for the worse. It was pneumonia this time, a weak immune system, doctors said. She needed more care than Lily could afford. Lily stayed at the hospital for 2 nights. When she returned, she found the apartment quiet, dark. A post-it on the fridge, "Call me if you need anything, B." She almost tore it up. But instead, she stuck it in her wallet. Blake returned late the next day. He looked tired, hollowed out. He didn't ask about her sister, didn't offer money, just handed her a thermos. "Chicken soup," he muttered. She blinked. "You cooked?" "I called Rosa. She told me the recipe." Lily didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They sat in silence, sipping soup from mismatched mugs. And then he asked, "Do you hate me?" She didn't answer right away. "No, but I don't trust you." "Fair." Another pause. "You got to give me the locket," she asked. He hesitated because I didn't know how to say what I wanted to say. "And what was that?" "I see you." The silence between them wasn't awkward this time. It was healing. She left the room first, but she carried the locket with her. He sat alone, his expression unreadable, but the whiskey remained untouched. And the mask, the one he'd worn since childhood, was beginning to shatter. That night, as Lily stood brushing her teeth, she caught her reflection in the mirror. For the first time in months, she didn't look like someone who was surviving. She looked like someone beginning to hope. And she hated how much of that had to do with Blake Ashford. Because if he wasn't the man she thought, what did that mean for her? And what would it mean if she fell? But this time for real. The party was more lavish than anything Lily had ever seen. It seemed like the most extravagant party she had ever been to. Velvet curtains framed sparkling crystal chandeliers, and champagne flowed from polished gold trays. Blake stood at the center of it all, every inch the aloof billionaire heir. He didn't look at her as she entered, his gaze fixed on a business associate while the crowd buzzed with chatter. Lily stood by the marble column, painfully aware of all the eyes on her. She tugged at the neckline of her dress, a flowing, deep emerald green gown chosen by Blake's stylist, wondering why a girl who had once cleaned fast food counters was here, pretending to be a wife in a world she didn't belong to. "Smile," Blake had said in the car. "Tonight is about appearances." She tried. For the cameras, for the promise, for the bills. But the smile didn't last long when the truth clawed at your throat. "Who is she?" one woman whispered as she passed. "I heard she used to work at McDonald's. Probably still smells like fries," another laughed. "She's not even that pretty." Lily bit her lip, trying not to react. She straightened, but her hands were shaking. Then lightning flashed. "Over here." "Did you two meet at the deli counter?" The laughter was stifling. The shame was unbearable. She turned to Blake, her eyes pleading. He was 10 feet away, surrounded by men in tuxedos and women in diamonds. His smile was faint, slick, carefree. He looked at her, then away. That broke something inside her. Without a word, she slipped out the side door, her heels echoing down the hallway. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and wet. She hadn't realized it was raining. Heavy, steady rain soaked her dress in seconds. She kept walking, her arms wrapped around herself, mascara smearing down her cheeks. Behind her, a voice called, "Led." She kept walking. Lily stopped. Finally, she turned. Blake was running toward her, his designer shoes ruined in a puddle, his hair dripping. "What are you doing?" he asked, panting. "You can't run outside in the middle of—" "Why not?" she shouted, tears mingling with the rain. "I won't stop you." He hesitated. "You're overreacting." "No," she said, her voice breaking. "I was reacting. Reacting to being humiliated in front of hundreds of people while you stood there and said nothing." Blake's jaw tightened. "You know what this is?" She whispered, trembling. "I knew it was fake. I just didn't know I would feel this." She turned away again, but he caught her wrist gently. "I took this deal because my sister was sick. Because I was drowning in debt and couldn't see any other way out. I thought I could handle the pretense. But this cruelty? Your friends laugh at me like I'm nothing." "I didn't tell them to," he said, quieter. "But you didn't stop them," she said, eyes fierce through the downpour. "And that's worse." Blake looked away. "I've worked since I was 14, she continued. "I cleaned houses, waited tables, took night shifts so my little sister could eat and get her meds. And tonight, I stood in a room full of people who think my struggle is funny." He closed his eyes. "I'm not ashamed of my past," Lily whispered, "but you made me feel like I should be." Something in him cracked. "My mother was a waitress." Lily blinked. "What?" He looked at her, rain sliding down his face. "Before she married my father, she worked at a diner. He hated it, called her names, tried to change her. She left him when I was a kid." "What happened to her?" "She died a few years later, alone. I never got to tell her I understood." Lily's heart squeezed. "I hated her for leaving," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "But now, sometimes I think she left to survive." Lily stepped closer, tears welling in her eyes. "So why are you becoming him?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because I didn't know how not to." And suddenly, everything made sense. The arrogance, the distance, the armor he wore like a second skin. He was protecting himself from becoming the vulnerable boy who lost his mother and never got closure. "You're not a mistake, Lily," he said, stepping closer. "I was—" Their breath mingled in the cold. Then, without planning to, Blake cupped her face with both hands. He didn't kiss her like he owned her. He kissed her like he was sorry, like he was grateful, like she mattered. It was slow, soft, and filled with things words couldn't express. When they pulled apart, Lily didn't speak for a long time. Then she whispered, "This doesn't fix everything." "I know," he said, "but maybe it's a start." They stood there, soaked, bruised, but no longer pretending. After a pause, she asked, "Why did you really take that bet?" He looked ashamed. "To prove I wasn't heartless, to prove I could commit, but I think I just wanted someone to stay." She reached for his hand. "Then try being someone worth staying for." He nodded slowly. They didn't go back to the party. They walked down the quiet, wet street together, shoes in hand, the weight of secrets lighter than it had ever been. And for the first time, Lily didn't feel like the girl who didn't belong. She felt like someone worth knowing, worth protecting, worth loving. Not a project, not a prop, just herself. And beside her, Blake looked over, smiling, not his polished public grin, but something softer, more human. Maybe this fake marriage had started with a lie. But something real was beginning to grow in the rain. The afternoon sun filtered through the penthouse windows when a knock echoed through the marble entryway. Lily opened the door, expecting a delivery, perhaps groceries or something Blake had ordered. But instead, a man stood there, mid-50s, weathered face, suit wrinkled and eyes sharp. "He must be Lily," he said, voice slick like oil. "Name's Gregory Torres. I'm your uncle." Lily's stomach dropped. "I think we need to talk." They sat in the living room, the silence between them thick with unease. Gregory sipped from a glass of water as he scanned the space. "Nice place," he said, smirking. "Bet it beats waiting tables, huh?" "What do you want?" Lily's voice was tight, cautious. "Let's just say I know things about your past, about what your husband doesn't." He leaned forward, pulling out a manila folder. Inside were old court documents, photos of Lily as a child, her younger sister cradled in her arms, her breath caught. "You remember the custody battle, don't you? After your mom disappeared? Your dad wasn't exactly the hero. Social services got involved, but that all went away thanks to a generous head factor." Lily stared at the documents, heart pounding. She whispered, "Because that benefactor was none other than Conrad Ashford, Blake's father. He paid to shut your story down, keep you and your sister quiet." Her world tilted. "I want a favor," Gregory said. "You've got influence now, access, use it, or I go public." With that, he left, the folder resting like a bomb on the glass coffee table. Blake returned that evening to find Lily pale, hands trembling as she held the folder. "What is this?" he asked, scanning the documents. His jaw clicked as he read the name. Conrad Ashford. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Later that night, Blake stood alone in his office, staring out the window, his fist tight at his sides. The name, Gregory Torres, rattled in his mind, a forgotten footnote from his father's past dealings, but what chilled him was the connection to Lily. His Lily. He made a call. "Find everything you can on Gregory Torres and cross-reference him with my father's old legal settlements," he ordered his assistant. By the next morning, the truth was clear. Conrad Ashford had paid Lily's family to disappear from a scandal involving the custody of 2 minor children. The mother was declared unstable, the father vanished. A court nearly took the girls away until a mysterious friend of the family intervened. Blake knew the game. It was corporate cleanup, and Lily had been a casualty. He slammed the report shut and left. At the Ashford estate, Blake stormed into his father's private office. "You lied to me," he spat. Conrad looked up from his desk, calm as ever. "Blake, sit down." I said you lied. Blake's voice rose. You covered up a custody case, paid off a family to bury a scandal, and that family was hers. Conrad exhaled, setting his pen down. That girl was a liability then, and she's a liability now. She's my wife. Conrad laughed. A waitress, Blake. Do you think the board will tolerate that when it comes time to hand over the empire? I don't care about the board, Blake growled. I don't care about the empire. Conrad stood. Then you're a fool. I built everything we have. You think you're ready to throw it all away for some pity project with pretty eyes and a broken past? There was a long silence. Then Blake removed his signet ring, the one symbolizing his place in the Ashford legacy, and dropped it on the desk. You can keep your empire, he said. I'm done. He walked out without another word. Lily hadn't slept. She stood by the window, the city sprawling beneath her, as if trying to understand how the world kept turning when everything inside her had stopped. Then she heard voices, Blake's voice, angry, raw. She moved closer to the hallway, just as his words echoed through the entry. I don't care about the money. I care about her. Her knees weakened. She's not a mistake. She's the only thing that's ever made sense. She turned and saw him in the doorway, coat still wet from the rain, his eyes locked on hers. I didn't know, he said softly, about your uncle, about my father, any of it. She took a breath. But I was part of it. A twisted game. Your father. I'm not him. He stepped forward, but she took a step back. Think you remember? I can't do this, Blake. I thought maybe we could pretend, but I can't live wondering if everything started as a lie. I didn't. She held up the wedding ring on her finger. It did, she said, and now it has to end. She pulled the ring off slowly, like peeling away a layer of skin. I'm leaving. His face fell. But she was already walking away, each step heavier than the last. He found the ring hours later, left on the kitchen counter beside a photo, Lily and her sister, taken on a sunny day years ago. The silence in the penthouse was deafening. He sat in the dark for hours, staring at the locket in his hand, the one he hadn't opened since the day his mother died. Inside was a photo of her, smiling in a diner apron, holding him as a boy. A waitress, just like Lily. He hadn't understood then what sacrifice looked like, but he did now. He clutched the locket tightly. I'm not done, he whispered. Outside, Lily hailed a cab, suitcase in hand. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, not from weakness, but from grief. Grief for the love she thought was growing, for the truth she couldn't outrun, for the man who had begun to mean something, and the walls she had to rebuild again. The driver asked where she was going. She hesitated. Anywhere but here. And as the city lights blurred past, Lily leaned her head against the window and whispered the name she couldn't stop loving. Blake. She wasn't sure he'd come after her, but part of her still hoped. Even after everything, even now. 'Cause sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the ones who almost made you believe you were safe. And that's what hurt the most. Rain slicked the sidewalks as Blake Ashford stepped out of his car and stared at the cramped little bookstore tucked between an old laundromat and a discount pharmacy. He adjusted his coat collar and entered, the bell above the door jingling softly. He wasn't sure what he expected, but it wasn't Lily Torres, in a faded cardigan and jeans, sitting behind the register with a stack of returns. She looked up and froze. Their eyes locked, a flicker of something passed between them. Pain, memory, maybe hope. I'm not here to make a scene, Blake said gently. I just wanted to see if you were okay. Lily stood slowly, guarded. I'm working. That's how I'm doing. He nodded. You look tired. Her mouth twisted into a bitter smile. That's what happens when you pay rent, buy groceries, and cover your sister's prescriptions without a billionaire's wallet. I'm not a billionaire anymore, he said, almost ashamed. She blinked. You walked away from the money? I walked away from the lies, from the trust fund, From him, his voice caught. For you. Lily's expression wavered, but she quickly masked it. That doesn't change what you did. I know, he said softly. I came to say I'm sorry, not to ask for anything. She studied him. Then you should go. And Blake did, without argument. But the next morning, when Lily opened the bookstore, a small donation receipt was taped to the door. $100,000, 0 cents, to St. Catherine's Pediatric Oncology Fund, in memory of Sophia Torres. She stood in the cold, hands trembling. That night, Blake didn't sleep. He worked the line at the local soup kitchen, anonymously plating meals, eyes scanning each face. Later, he unloaded boxes at the back of the community center, where no cameras could follow. He didn't tell anyone why. He didn't need to. Days passed, then weeks. Every morning, Lily found fresh flowers at the bookstore. No name, just white gardens, her sister's favorite. She didn't speak to him, not yet, but she stopped tearing the notes apart. One morning, her phone buzzed. Her sister's doctor. Good news. Sophia was in remission. She collapsed onto the bookstore floor in tears, hands pressed to her mouth. Later that evening, Blake sat alone at the community center, reviewing donation forms. A soft knock broke his focus. He turned. Lily stood in the doorway, clutching something in her hand. They didn't speak. She walked over slowly, fingers opening. It was a silver locket. Blake inhaled sharply. Where did you find that? Behind the dresser in your guest room, she said. It fell when I packed. He took it gently, opened it. Inside were 2 photographs, one of a smiling woman in a waitress uniform, his mother, and on the other side, a little boy with his arms around her neck. Lily looked at him. She was like me, wasn't she? Blake nodded, voice hoarse. She raised me alone, until she couldn't anymore. Lily stared at the locket, then at him. I thought I hated you, she whispered, but I think I hated needing you. His throat tightened. I don't want you to need me, I just want you to be okay. She said quietly. But I don't know if we are. I'm not asking for us, he replied. Just a moment, and she did. In silence, 2 people sat on a worn bench in a community center lobby. Nothing between them but a silver locket and everything it meant. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. Blake didn't press her. He didn't call or text. Instead, he kept showing up at the places that mattered. Not to win her back, but because he no longer knew who he was without doing something that mattered. He began tutoring teens at a local outreach center, kids who had stories not unlike Lily's. He spent afternoons fixing up an old shelter kitchen, working beside elderly volunteers. Every nail he hammered, every box he lifted, stripped away another layer of the man he used to be. And Lily noticed. Not because he told her, he didn't. She heard from others. Mrs. Chen, the bookstore customer who ran the after-school reading program, mentioned Blake reading aloud every Thursday evening. Eminent voices and everything. Jarrett, a delivery guy she barely knew, said he saw Blake fixing up the roof of the shelter. He didn't look rich, Jarrett had added, just tired, but kind of happy. Lily didn't know what to make of it, until the day she saw it for herself. She was walking past the shelter with Sophia, her sister finally strong enough for short walks. And there he was, Blake Ashford, in jeans and a hoodie, helping a little girl glue beads onto a construction paper card. He didn't see her. But Sophia did. That's him, right? She asked. Lily nodded. Are you still mad at him? Lily looked at the man who had once been the symbol of everything cruel and transactional in her life, now laughing as a toddler wiped glitter on his face. She whispered, I'm not. Later that night, Lily returned to the bookstore after closing. She found a small envelope slid under the door. Inside was a photo. It was taken from a distance, Blake, kneeling at a gravesite, a fresh bouquet of white lilies in his hand. On the back, a note. For Sophia. I never knew her, but I owe her everything. Lily's chest tightened, her hands trembled. She clutched the envelope to her heart. The next morning, she walked into the shelter. Blake was there, reading to a half-circle of kids. When he looked up and saw her, he froze. His voice faltered mid-sentence. "Keep going," she said softly. "I'll wait." He finished the story, distracted. And then they were alone. She held out the envelope. "I got your note," she said. He nodded. "So I saw you with the kids," she added, "and I think I see who you are now." Blake looked down. "I wasn't trying to prove anything. I know," she said. "That's why it matters." They stood in silence. Lily reached into her bag and pulled out the locket again. "Aliga belonged to your mother, but I think it belongs with someone who remembers her for who she really was, not just a photo and a file." Blake hesitated, then closed his fingers around it. "She would have liked you." Lily's eyes shimmered. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "I'll wait," he replied. "You already did," she said with a soft smile. That night, he walked her home, just once, no promises, no expectations. But as they stood at the door of her shared apartment, she turned to him and said, "Do you want to come in?" He shook his head gently. "Not tonight." She nodded, lips trembling. "I'll be back," he added. Lily watched him go, heart aching in a way that didn't hurt. It was something new, something fragile, something real. And when she closed the door behind her, she whispered to the silence, "Maybe this isn't the end after all." Blake stood nervously outside the small brick apartment complex, a brown paper bag of groceries in one hand and a bouquet of sunflowers in the other. It wasn't a penthouse. There were no doormen, no panoramic skyline views, just cracked sidewalks, creaky stairs, and the faint scent of cinnamon from a neighbor's kitchen window. But this was his new beginning. Lily opened the door, her hair tucked into a loose braid, wearing a faded bookstore t-shirt and wide, cautious eyes. She didn't smile right away, but she didn't close the door either. "I didn't come to change your mind," Blake said softly, holding up the sunflowers like a peace offering. "I just thought you might be hungry." Her lips curved slightly. "I'm always hungry." He followed her inside the modest apartment, noting the secondhand couch, the cracked coffee table, and a small vase on the windowsill with a single dried rose. It was a far cry from the opulence he was born into, and yet something about it felt more like home than anything he'd ever known. They cooked together that night, shoulder to shoulder in her tiny kitchen. Lily handed him vegetables to chop while she stirred pasta on the stove. He burned the garlic. She teased him. For a moment, they weren't heiress and contract bride. They were just Blake and Lily. Over dinner, they laughed. Not forced laughter, not for show, but real, unfiltered joy. She told him about a childhood memory of dancing in the rain with her sister. He told her about the time he snuck out of boarding school to watch fireworks and got caught by a groundskeeper who let him go because he missed his own daughter. When dessert was done and the dishes sat stacked in the sink, Blake reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small frame. It wasn't a ring. It was a photo. A candid snapshot of the three of them, Blake, Lily, and her sister, taken weeks ago at a charity event. Her sister was laughing, Blake was looking at Lily, and Lily was glowing. He slid it across the table. "A contract," he said, voice steady despite the racing of his heart. "A choice." Lily stared at the picture, fingers trembling as she touched the glass. "I can't promise perfection," Blake added, "but I can promise truth. I want to build something real." Silently, they both wished him. "For you, for us." Tears welled in her eyes. "I love you, Lily," he said, no fanfare, no showmanship, just sincerity. Not because I'm supposed to, not because it looks good, but because somewhere between the mess and the mistakes, I found someone who makes me want to be more. The community center chapel was small, its pews scuffed and uneven. Fairy lights hung loosely from the ceiling. There was no grand orchestra, no press, no designer gowns or couture suits. But the room was full of warmth, laughter, and a handful of people who truly mattered. Lily's sister sat in the front row, her eyes bright and healthy, her hand clutching a handmade bouquet of wildflowers. Blake stood at the altar in a simple navy suit, his gaze fixed on the back doors. When they opened, time stopped. Lily walked down the aisle in a soft cream dress that brushed her ankles. No diamonds, no veil, just honesty and grace. Her smile wasn't nervous, it was free. When she reached him, he took her hand, kissed her knuckles, and whispered, "You came." "I never really left," she replied. The officiant asked if they wanted to share personal vows. Blake nodded. "I once thought love was a performance," he began, "something you played for the world to see. But real love, it's quiet, it's messy. It's someone burning garlic in your kitchen and showing up with sunflowers when you least expect it. It's a girl who walked into my life with nothing but her dignity and ended up giving me everything I didn't know I was missing." Lily's voice quivered when she spoke. "I thought love was something for other people, people with perfect lives and perfect families. But then you showed me that broken things can be beautiful too. That maybe love isn't found in diamonds or penthouses, but in apologies, shared meals, and second chances." They exchanged simple silver bands, no engravings, no glitter. Just truth. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Blake didn't hesitate. He pulled Lily into a kiss, not like their staged wedding kiss months ago. This kiss was gentle, grounded, overflowing with every apology, every promise, and every piece of unspoken love between them. The room erupted in applause. Later that night, they sat on the floor of their new apartment, eating leftover cake from paper plates. Lily's sister had already fallen asleep on the couch. Blake leaned his head on Lily's shoulder. "We did it," he murmured. She turned, her eyes soft. "We started it." He looked around the room, the peeling wallpaper, the cracked tiles, and then at her. "I've never felt richer." She laughed. "Don't get used to instant noodles." He grinned. "I'll learn to cook." Lily reached into the drawer beside her and pulled out the locket she'd once found, the one that matched the one Blake always carried. She opened it. Inside, she'd added their picture. "It belonged to your mother," she whispered, "but it brought us here." Blake placed his hand over hers. "Yeah, you brought us here." They sat in silence for a while, watching the city lights from their window. No paparazzi, no deadlines, just Blake and Lily. A new beginning, carved from broken promises, quiet redemption, and the undeniable truth of real love. The morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains of the modest apartment, casting a warm golden hue across the small dining table where Blake and Lily sat, sipping coffee in comfortable silence. The once arrogant heir now wore jeans faded with honest work and a t-shirt that bore the logo of the nonprofit they had built together, Rise Up Foundation. It was a far cry from the luxury penthouses and designer suits of his old life, and yet Blake had never looked more like himself. The organization had started small, just an idea scribbled onto a napkin between bites of late-night Chinese takeout. Blake had suggested they use their platform to do more than just heal their own wounds. Lily had smiled, the tired lines of her face softening. "Let's make it for women like me," she had said. Women who were written off, used, forgotten. And so they did. The nonprofit provided housing, job training, and counseling for women escaping cycles of poverty and abuse. Blake used what connections he hadn't burned to gather initial support. Lily used her story, her resilience, her truth. In the first few weeks, they hosted workshops in borrowed spaces. Lily taught budgeting, resume writing, even cooking. Blake, once clueless about the price of a gallon of milk, sat quietly in the back of the room and listened. One evening, while organizing boxes of donated clothes, Blake turned to Lily with something small but life-altering in his hands: new business cards. He handed one to her without a word. She read it. Billy Torres, Ashford, co-founder and executive director. She looked up at him, tears threatening. "You kept my name." Blake nodded, his voice low but sure. "I left mine behind. That name gave me power, but yours gave me purpose." They decided together that the foundation would operate under her name, not just in honor of what she'd survived, but to reclaim everything that had been taken from her. The official launch event was held in a community center adorned with secondhand flowers and hand-painted banners. No marble floors, no champagne fountains, but there was laughter, warmth, and rows of women whose lives were about to be transformed. When it came time for speeches, Blake stepped back, insisting Lily be the one to lead. But it was Lily's sister, Ava, who surprised everyone by walking onto the stage. Fragile but glowing, her once weak voice now rang with pride. "I spent most of my life in and out of hospitals," Ava began. "When I was little, I thought Lily was just my big sister. But she was my mother, my protector, my everything. I didn't understand what sacrifice meant until I watched her give up meals so I could eat, work 3 jobs so I could get medicine, cry in silence so I wouldn't hear her breaking." The room was silent. Blake's jaw clenched, his eyes misted. "She didn't just raise me, she saved me. And now she's saving others." "If that's not legacy," Ava said, turning to her sister, "then I don't know what is." Lily's hand trembled in Blake's. He squeezed it once, firm, grounding. After the speeches, the 3 of them, Blake, Lily, and Ava, stood at the back of the room, watching women sign up for programs, hug each other, and cry in release. Their nonprofit wasn't a monument to pain, it was a bridge toward healing. Later that night, in their kitchen, Lily found Blake flipping pancakes, his hair tousled and flowers smudged across his cheek. She laughed, truly laughed, and it echoed off the small walls of their home. "You used to think caviar was a food group," she teased, wrapping her arms around his waist. He turned, feigning offense. "And now I'm a pancake artisan." "You're more than that," she whispered against his chest. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. They sat down at the tiny table with chipped corners and mismatched chairs. Ava joined them, still in her event dress but barefoot. A photo of their launch day sat framed on the shelf behind them, next to a snapshot of their courthouse wedding. A new family, built not on secrets or contracts, but on choice. And love. Days turned into weeks, and the foundation grew. Women found shelter, children found safety, and Lily found a new rhythm to her life. One not dominated by fear or survival, but filled with intent and heart. She was no longer just the girl from behind the fast food counter. She was a leader, a change maker, a mother figure to those who'd never had one. Blake adjusted too. He no longer relied on his name to open doors. When his father tried to reassert control, offering financial backing in exchange for visibility, Blake declined without hesitation. "Visibility isn't the point," he said. "Impact is." When pressed by reporters about the Ashford legacy, Blake gave the same answer each time. "My legacy is being written under a different name now." Their home wasn't grand. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a balcony that overlooked a noisy street, but every inch was filled with purpose. Lily hung framed quotes on the walls. Ava painted canvas after canvas, filling the space with color and light. And Blake, who once only saw value in status, now found joy in packing lunchboxes, fixing leaky faucets, and taking late-night walks hand in hand with Lily. One morning, as the sun filtered through their tiny kitchen, Ava pulled out a gift she had been saving. A canvas covered in soft hues of gold and rose. It depicted 3 figures, Lily standing tall with an open hand, Ava younger and looking up at her, and Blake behind them both, holding a sign that read, "Rise up." "It's for the office," Ava said, blushing. Lily's breath hitched. Blake didn't speak, but he wiped a tear from the corner of his eye before it fell. At their next board meeting, the canvas was hung on the main wall, directly above the words, "Founded in resilience, run on compassion, rising together." That week, Blake and Lily hosted a small gathering for the foundation's first-year anniversary. No gala, no red carpet, just community. Over bowls of chili and trays of potluck desserts, they shared stories. One woman spoke of escaping an abusive partner. Another thanked them for giving her child their first bed. And one teenager, barely 17, spoke of her dream to become a lawyer, inspired by Lily's fire. As the night drew to a close, a little girl tugged at Blake's sleeve. "Are you the man who made pancakes with Miss Lily?" He smiled and crouched to her level, guilty. "You're lucky," she whispered. "She makes everyone feel safe." He looked over at Lily, who was wiping down a table and laughing with a volunteer. "Yeah, he murmured. I really am. Back at home that evening, Blake curled beside Lily on their small couch, their legs tangled beneath a quilt Ava had stitched. He turned to her, voice quiet. Do you remember when we started this whole thing with a lie? She nodded. But it didn't end with one. He agreed. It ended with truth? She leaned into him, eyes heavy with peace. And love? He brushed a kiss to her forehead and whispered, You changed my life. You gave it back to me, she replied. As the sky turned midnight blue and the city buzzed below them, their laughter mingled with the hum of traffic and the heartbeat of something new. Something built not on arrogance or escape, but on redemption. And the next morning, over pancakes and orange juice, Ava held up a small scribbled card with the name Lily Torras Furled Foundations sketched in bold letters. She grinned. I think you should add your name to the legacy. Lily laughed. I already did. Blake reached for her hand across the table, warmth radiating from his smile. Bet on her as a joke. She became the reason he changed everything.